Why can't we separate from each other?
Whoa! Why is maggots coming out of us?
Chimo, what is this?
Get off me! Get off me! Somebody help us!
I cannot move! God of heaven, what is this?
Chichi has finally killed me. After all my warnings!
The screaming started at dawn. It was the kind of screaming that had pulled people out of their sleep, that made mothers cover their children's ears and old men drop their morning palm wine. It came from Deacon Emeka's house, the two-story building at the end of Amizu Street, and it did not stop. Inside the room, on a bed that had become a trap, Chichi and Deacon Emeka were tangled together in the most horrifying way any human being could imagine. They had woken up that way. One moment they had been sleeping, and the next, something invincible and terrible had locked them together. Flesh against flesh, body against body, and no amount of pulling, crying, and begging was releasing them. Help me! Somebody help me! Chichi shrieked, her voice raw and broken. She was in her underwear, so was he, and they could not move apart. It was as if two magnets had reversed, not repelling, but fusing, and the more they struggled, the worse the pain became. Deacon Emeka was crying like a man who had seen his own grief. God of Abraham, what is this? What is happening to me? His voice cracked on every word. Sweat poured down his face. He had stopped trying to pull away because every attempt sent a sharp searing pain through his body. Then Chichi looked down and she screamed louder than she had ever screamed in her 22 years of life. Between them, from the very place where their sin had lived, small white maggots were beginning to crawl, slowly at first, then faster, wriggling out in clusters, dropping onto the bed sheets, multiplying with every passing second. The smell hit the room like a wall. They are coming out of me! Chichi sobbed. They are coming out of me! God, please, somebody help us! The neighbors had gathered outside the door by now. Someone had called for help. A small boy had run down the street, shouting the news, and within 30 minutes, half of Amizu community had surrounded Deacon Emeka's compound. Some shocked, some praying, but most of them pointing, laughing, and whispering. This was not how Chichi had planned her morning. But then again, no one ever plans the moment their sins catch up with them. Kindly do well to subscribe, like, and share as we listen to Chichi's story. Everyone in Amenzo knew Chichi, not because she was remarkable in any honorable way, not because she had won a scholarship or started a business or helped the poor. They knew her the way a community knows a thorn in its side, painfully, constantly, and against their will. Her full name was Chidima Okafor, but nobody called her that. She had been Chichi since she was a baby, back when her mother was still alive and her father had not yet drunk himself into an early grave. Both parents had died before she turned 12. Her mother from a brief but brutal illness. Her father from the kind of slow destruction that comes when a man gives up on living. And so, Chichi had been sent to live with her mother's younger sister, Amarachi. Auntie Amarachi was a good woman. Everyone agreed on that, even the people who pitied her. She was a seamstress who worked from morning till night. She had survived a marriage that ended in divorce. Her husband had left her for a younger woman after years of trying and failing to have children. It had broken something in Amarachi, quietly in a place she did not show people. But she had rebuilt herself with prayer, hard work, and the kind of dignity that does not need applause. When Chichi arrived in her home as a grieving 12-year-old, Auntie Amarachi had opened her arms and her small house without hesitation. That kindness would cost her more than she ever imagined. By the time Chichi had turned 18, something had twisted in her. Perhaps it was the grief she never properly mourned. Perhaps it was the hunger of growing up with just enough but never plenty. Perhaps it was simply the nature she had inherited from a father who never knew when to stop. Whatever it was, Chichi had become a young woman who wanted everything and was willing to use her body to get it. She was beautiful, and she knew it with a dangerous confidence. Tall, smooth skinned, with eyes that men described as trouble before they walked into them anyway. She dressed in ways that made the older women in the market hiss and mutter prayers under their breath. She laughed too loudly, she stayed out too late, and she had absolutely no interest in the kind of quiet, respectable life her auntie Amarachi had built for herself. The wives of Amizu had already come to Amarachi's door 3 times that year alone. The first had been Mama Chukudi, a heavy woman with arms like a blacksmith, who had arrived at the gate with fires in her eyes. Your daughter, she said, refusing to call Chichi a niece, is chasing my husband. Tell her I will not warn her again. Auntie Amarachi had begged. She had apologized with her whole body, bowing and pressing her palms together. She had wept before the woman left. The second had been quieter but more frightening. A young woman named Ngozi, who had simply stood at the door, stared at Auntie Amarachi with eyes full of tears, and said, "Is this the way you raised her? Is this what you taught her?" She had not shouted, she had not threatened, but the quiet of it had stayed in Auntie Amarachi's chest for weeks like a stone. The third had come with 2 other women and nearly caused a scene that the entire street will never forget. Each time, Auntie Amarachi had called Chichi, sat her down and begged, "Chichi, I am on my knees for you. This life you are living will destroy you. These men have wives, they have children. You are storing up curses for yourself. My daughter, please." And each time, Chichi had done the same thing. She had sat, she had listened, she had waited until Auntie Amarachi was finished, and then she had looked at her auntie with an expression that mixed with boredom, with contempt, and said something that cut deeper than any insult should. "Auntie, at least I have men coming to me," she had said one evening, examining her fingernails. "That's more than a divorced woman with an empty womb can say." The silence that followed those words was always the worst part. Auntie Amarachi never responded. She never shouted back. She would simply close her eyes for a moment as if absorbing a blow, and then quietly leave the room to go and cry where Chichi could not see her. But on the day Deacon Emeka's wife placed something ancient and terrible in her husband's food and prayed a prayer no woman should ever have to pray, the season of warnings had ended. The price was coming, and it would arrive before sunrise. By 7 in the morning, the crowd outside Deacon Emeka's house was 3 people deep. Word had spread the way only scandal can spread in a small community. Rapidly, hungrily and with embellishments added at every telling. Some people said Chichi and the deacon had been found completely naked. Others said they had seen a spirit standing over the bed. One old woman near the borehole claimed she had dreamed of this exact thing 2 nights before and had been ignored when she tried to warn people. The truth was strange enough without the additions. Neighbors who had been allowed briefly inside before the door was shut again confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The two were physically inseparable, not by rope or chain, by something no one could explain. And the maggots, anyone who had seen them would not easily forget the sight. Inside the room, Chichi had passed through panic and arrived somewhere beyond it. She was no longer screaming, she was shaking, a full body, trembling that would not stop, and whimpering in small rhythmic sounds like a wounded animal. The bedsheet beneath them was ruined. The smell had grown worse. She could feel things moving, and that sensation alone was enough to make her want to leave her own body. Deacon Emeka had gone somewhere inside himself. His eyes were open, but he was no longer fully present. He was a man watching his entire life collapse. His title, his marriage, his reputation as a deacon for 15 years. His children who would soon hear him. He was muttering something, maybe his scripture, maybe his wife's name. It was impossible to tell. His wife, Adeze, was not in the house. She had left the previous evenings to visit her sister in the next town, or so she had told him. What she had actually done the previous evening, the corner she had visited, the woman she had paid, the ancient words she had spoken while holding a small wrapped object over a candle flame. None of that was known yet, but there are no secrets in Amizu, and the knowing was coming. Outside, the crowd had begun to organize itself the way Nigerian crowds do, into loud opinions and louder suggestions. They need to call a native doctor. God forbid. What they need is a pastor, powerful deliverance. Has anyone called the hospital? This could be medical. An old man named Papa Obiora, who had lived on the street for over 40 years and had seen things, shook his head slowly. This is not a hospital matter, he said with quiet sanctity. What doctor will use injection to separate what has been joined this way? He tapped his walking stick on the ground twice. This is a covenant matter. The crowd had parted briefly when Auntie Amarachi arrived. She had been the last to know. Someone had come to the shop and told her seamstress apprentice first, who had run to fetch her with the news stammered out between breath. And Amarachi had come running down Amizu Street with her wrapper half-tied and her headscarf askew, hope and dread sharing the same space in her chest. When she pushed through the crowd and someone pulled her back from the door. You cannot go in there. It is not a good sight. She had stood at the edge of the compound and pressed both hands over her mouth. She could hear Chichi's whimpering through the wall. She could smell what was coming from under the door. Chichi, she whispered, not loudly, not with anger, just the name, pressed into the morning air like a prayer. My Chichi! The mockery around her was immediate. Is that not the aunt? See her! Amarachi, your daughter has brought you shame, oh? After everything. This girl has been doing this for years. This one was bound to happen. One woman, a known gossip named Mrs. Eze, had the audacity to walk close to Auntie Amarachi and say, loudly enough for those around to hear her, maybe if you had your own children, you would have trained her better. Imagine, a barren woman cannot know how to raise a child. Auntie Amarachi did not respond. She stood very still, Tears moved silently down her face as she stared at the door behind her, which her niece was suffering, and she felt something she had not expected to feel in that moment. Not anger, not shame, though there was shame too. What she felt, mostly powerfully, was grief because she had loved this girl. She still loved this girl. And love does not stop because it has been mocked or rejected or repaid with cruelty. It just hurts more. She began to pray, standing there in the middle of the compound, with the crowd watching and some of them laughing, her lips moving quietly, her eyes open, her heart completely broken. Somewhere across town, a medicine practitioner named Dibia Ogweli was woken by his apprentice and given a message. He listened carefully, then asked two questions before he reached for his bag. If you have listened this far, kindly let me know what you think about the story and what will happen next. If you're interested in a part 2, let me also know in the comment section. Also, do well to subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next part.